This is a day of news for us here. A startling revelation to tell you about from an Iraqi scientist. Stay with me here. An Iraqi scientist who apparently has ties to ISIS. He says that ISIS contracted him to produce chemical weapons for them. Now, listen to what I just said. That he was contracted by ISIS to produce chemical weapons for them, by ISIS. If you're asking why he would come forward, a scientist saying, I helped ISIS develop the chemical weapons, here's the answer. He's on death row right now, this guy. He's on death row in Iraq being held captive by Allied forces, and he wanted to release this information before his death. Wow. Joining us now is reporter Rachel Blevins, who is following this story. Rachel, I guess let me just start with who is this this scientist, and where was he before? How do we know he actually was a scientist with this capacity?
Right, so before that he was working for the government in Iraq as a geologist, and he said that in 2014 ISIS came into the city of Mosul and just completely took over. And so he went back to work not sure what to expect because ISIS came in and they took over the military bases, they took over the airports, and they essentially became the government there. And so he claims that when he tried to go back to work, members of the Islamic State approached him and they offered him a job creating chemical weapons for them, because he had certain specialties, and he also had access to university laboratories and manufacturing facilities. And so he claims that he was actually paid by ISIS to create these weapons.
So it's almost like the Iraqi team, the forces that the United States created are there, right? They get their butts kicked by ISIS. ISIS comes in and takes over everything that they own, their infrastructure, their roads, their equipment, their scientists, this guy being one of them, and says, okay, you used to work for those guys, now you work for us, and this is what you're going to do, right? Here's, I think, what the key question that most people would be asking is, because it concerns us, right? Is there any proof, or do we have any knowledge that he actually was able to deliver chemical weapons to ISIS, and have they, in effect, used them in any way?
Right, so this scientist specifically had a specialty in creating mustard gas, and he says in this article that he did with the Washington Post, in this interview that he did, he claims that ISIS was more focused on creating weapons that would terrify people or that would mess with the psychology of troops that they were fighting, but not as much about creating powerful weapons that would actually kill massive amounts of people. Now, that's just from his standpoint, but that's what he claims.
So the capability is there, but we can't nail down the fact that they actually are there, that they existed, or that they've been deployed. Let's bring in Michael Maloof. Michael Maloof, as you know, is a former Pentagon official. He's an expert on this part of the world. How concerning is it for you, and what would you be able to share to this story that we're breaking about the possibility that ISIS may at least have the capability of doing chemical weapons?
They have that capability, not just in mustard gas, as Rachel points out, but also in sarin, in the production of sarin. Right after Saddam Hussein fell, many of the people involved in his chemical weapons development programs escaped. They joined ISIS. They became, because of the way the Americans were treating the Sunnis at that time, they all went and joined ISIS and as part of that creation. And so most of them haven't been found. They still exist. And they actually, I mean, I came across a National Ground Intelligence Center report. It was still classified, basically said that chemical weapons, sarin, were produced in Iraq, transferred to Turkey, then given to ISIS to be transferred into Syria for use. They've actually been used against Syrian troops.
And Rachel, you're not saying that there's any evidence that the actual composition of this chemical weapon was found in Syria, correct? You're not saying that.
Right. I'm just giving the account of the scientist who essentially said that he was involved in this program. And
they asked him to do something, and he did it, right?
Right. And he was one of the few people who was actually captured as a result of that.
So then the question, Michael, is if this guy says they got me, they asked me to do this, I did it for him. He's probably not the only one.
No, he's not. There's many more. And in fact, their production line then was transferred on over into Turkey. Turkey at that time was helping to facilitate ISIS militants going into Syria. And they were using the chemical weapons.
Do you believe that we will see reports anytime in the near future of this type of escalation of the use of chemical weapons? And what will it do to the equation there? Because we're constantly, by we, I mean the United States, constantly blaming Assad for this, right?
Yes.
He may not be the only one.
No. My concern is, and this is what the Russians have been trying to say and investigate and say, look, they have that capability. They've been using it. Militants have been using it. They have the knowledge, the know-how. And this is the problem. Now that ISIS has turned into an insurgency group, many of those people are part of that insurgency group, and they can use that and reproduce. They'll be in a cruder form, but they still have that capability.
This is important information. I'm glad we had a chance to share it with our audience. Michael Maloof, we thank you. Rachel Blevins, we thank you as well.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.